The information, statements, comments, views, and opinions expressed or provided in this podcast, including by speakers, are not necessarily those of myself and may not be current. The Lost Ones Masonic Podcast does not make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of any of the information, statements, comments, views, or opinions contained in this podcast, and any liability therefore, including in respect of direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage of any kind whatsoever, is expressly disclaimed. The Lost Ones Masonic Podcast does not undertake any obligation whatsoever to provide any form of update, amendment, change, or correction to any of the information, statements, comments, views, or opinions set forth in this podcast. All right, everybody, welcome to the Lost Ones Masonic Podcast. I am your host, Brother Joshua Feliciano. I hail from St. James Lodge number 114, based out of the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the state of New York. A quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect any views and opinions of any Masonic body in which myself or the guest speaker is a member of. This is the second episode, and we are going over the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. On today's show, I brought over a very close brother of mine who has known me since I came into Prince Hall. He is my current commander-in-chief for Long Island Consistory number 61, and he is also the current senior warden for Sons of Kings Lodge number 123, based out of the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the state of New York. Please welcome good brother Mark Alexander. So, Mark, we're gonna go over your history real quick, and we're gonna iron this out and go over everything. So one thing about Mark is a lot of people don't realize that Mark actually came from a Scottish Rite body originally. He used to be a member of the Supreme Council of Louisana, which I'm very interested in getting conversation about. And I want to make this very clear to everybody. We don't consider them, depending on who you talk to, we don't consider them clandestine, because we do have some that consider them clandestine based on the invasion of territory. But if you talk to the majority of Prince Hall, we pretty much call them irregular because of the fact that they follow the first three, they confer the first three Scottish Rite degrees when under the rules of regularity, they're not supposed to. Mark will get into all this eventually and stuff like that. When you talk to them, they are completely regular, and Mark will get into that as well on why. But we also want to make a distinction and make a point to understand that you do have regular Scottish Rite, and then you have these bogus Scottish Rites. And we're going to differentiate the two so people can understand, like, hey, you were really part of a bogus body. And I'm not talking about Supreme Council of Louisana. So, Mark, first question I'm going to ask you, what made you get into Freemasonry? And more so, what made you choose the Supreme Council of Louisana when you first came in?
Well, I joined Freemasonry in 2000. I wasn't internet savvy. I'm not even sure if I had my laptop, computer at the time. But when I first joined, I came in through my neighbor, who was Darryl Yates Smiley. A lot of people might know him from being the father of Steele from Smith & Wesson. Mm-hmm. They were my neighbors. So that's who actually brought me in. Yeah. I didn't really know anything about masonry too much. Actually, my mother, God rest her soul, she said that, it was a good thing and stuff like that. So then I started doing a little, research into it. I picked up a couple of books. A lot of them was anti-Masonic, but
you gotta watch what you see on these YouTube channels.
Yeah, exactly. But the main thing that I was attracted to was the brotherhood at the time, more than anything else.
Right. That's what brought me in.
Yeah, that's what kind of the brotherhood itself kind of brought me in. I figured I'll have a couple of older men around because I grew up without my father. I didn't have too many men in my life or whatever, so I thought that would help guide me at the time. I was 25 when I first joined. So I petitioned around 24 or something like that. And that's the how I came in and how I came through, and how I didn't, like I said, I didn't really pick Louisiana. It was just one of those things, like most people when they first join, they don't do too much about Freemasonry, especially back in the day. Whoever was a Mason next to them, that's where they went.
Right, because we don't do enough research sometimes to understand that there is one, we all think it's one giant fraternity.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't realize that it's actually, broken down into pieces. So you didn't know what was the Supreme Council of Louisiana. You just thought it was a regular, completely normal, and just everything was the same.
I thought it was Masons. Now I can't say
which
before joining. But I just, like I said, I thought Masons was Masons. But I can't say before joining. I actually read A Meaning of Masonry by Wilmhurst, right? Mm-hmm. Now, and then when I wound up joining the lodge, I was like, this doesn't exactly match, because the officers is different,
Right.
Then when I came,
it's a completely different structure.
Yeah, it was similar, but because instead of, like, we didn't have they don't have deacons, or they have one master of ceremony, things like that. So no stewards. So that was the difference, right. And so when I seen that, I was like, it's a little bit different. And then again, once I joined, I still didn't really know what was the big deal or difference or whatever.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about let's go to you being initiated now, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
Came in, you know how they do. All other non-regular body. Put it like this, right? I came in November 11th, 2000. That was my initiation date. Mm-hmm. And one of the men that night, he left with a swollen hand.
Wait. He left with a swollen hand.
He left with a swollen hand.
So wait, one of the guys that you came in with?
No.
One of your line brothers?
Not one of my line brothers. It was 5 of us that came in. Not one of us that came in. The people that was initiating us left with a swollen hand, because they didn't use no paddle. It was all hand.
Okay.
Work.
Oh,
exactly. So
I
got
see.
slapped and stuff like that.
You got slapped around.
Yeah, slapped around.
I mean,
exactly.
I could understand. I could understand that.
But exactly. That's what it was. Going through Scottish Rite, though, it was like, again, it is different, because the first thing you basically encounter is the ceremony, the chamber of reflection.
Right.
So
which is believe it or not, like I've had discussion with brothers in Prince Hall, and half know what it is. Those that done research, because we don't really do that too much in Prince Hall. The chamber of reflection. So they've heard about it. A few have experienced it, because some have actually gone out the way to do it. But for the most part, when they hear about the chamber of reflections, they're like, "What's that?" So they don't really understand what that really is.
Unless they nice Templars get it on this side, but other than that, they don't really touch into it.
Yeah,
so they have no idea.
I'm not Nice Templar, so I wouldn't know.
I don't know either. That's what I heard.
Okay, there you go.
Exactly.
So you went through your initiation process, right? Mm-hmm. You went through all 3 degrees, and at this point, you don't know the difference between what we do in Prince Hall and what we do and what they were doing there. So, how long were you with the Supreme Council of Louisiana?
Let me see, 2000, so 13 years.
13 years.
13 years. Yep. 13
so
years.
So you know what I'm going to ask you next is, what made you leave?
What made me I came over? Well, once I was, a little learned, and then I had brothers that was, they didn't really keep any secrets from us, and they didn't lie to us when I got anyway, from what I understood, and I made sure I never lied to anybody when I brought them in or whatever. I remember one particular time when we had a brother that was trying to join us or whatever. We was like, all right, we got you got Prince Hall, go do your own research, go do what you want to do. You know what I mean? And we explained to people that, they have their organization, we have ours, you might not be able to visit. You understand? We kind of told people that. I could say only could speak.
So you guys were up front from the very beginning. It was up front.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I can only speak for my lodge itself. I don't know what any other lodge or the jurisdiction.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we didn't. Yeah.
So you guys were honest with everybody who came in and said, listen, at the end of the day, you can't visit and so on and so forth. You can't, we're different. We're completely separate. It's not what you think it is and whatever. So that's a good thing that you guys were honest. And I respect that. But, and then, having conversations with you, at some point you must have felt different.
It was I was aware of the difference and stuff like that after a while. I'm not particularly sure how I found out. But like I said, the brothers in my lodge, they really did study, and that's how I developed the way I am. So through talking and stuff like that, I understood the difference. Now, just going back, just to lead to it, not that I said I never had one of those experiences where I went to a lodge and was like, oh, they didn't let me in or anything. I never had anything like that. Now, one particular time, I remember I did visit down in D.C. and we went to go visit the House of the Temple, the Scottish Rite, the Southern Jurisdiction temple. Me and my wife, and we took the tour. They was all nice. I had my chain on, and all was Masons. They took me into extra rooms. It was nice for me or whatever. And I remember at the end of the day, because I was aware at the time, like I said, at the end of the tour, it was like, oh, if you show me your dues card, then I can give you this or that. And I was like, I ain't got it with me. I had it with me. So,
you knew
because I knew he wasn't recognized by them. I understood the situation.
Right.
Right. So I wasn't going to even try to play myself or whatever, give him the card and then feel any type of way or whatever.
Right.
So I just didn't give him the dues card and tell him thank you and stuff like that. But it eventually came to a point where I kind of felt that I somewhat hit a glass ceiling. I was just dissatisfied more with the organization more than anything else. I wasn't able to, I know, like I said, doing all this reading, I wasn't going to be able to visit these lodges and see these places in which, sit in large meetings with any other, with regular Masons. So that's one of the things that basically led to my saying. And at the time, I was just say, just at the time, it was kind of funny because like you said, the Supreme Council of Louisiana isn't exactly clandestine. So we was kind of hoping that they would be able to get recognition,
Which if you look at history and what's been going on recently, I think within the last couple of years, there's been a lot more of acceptance with the Supreme Council of Louisiana. I mean, you saw that one article that came out with the Sovereign Grand Commander sitting with the Grand Master of Louisiana, of the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, and that was a huge picture because there's history there. At one point, they did have them two bodies did have recognition at one point.
Yeah, I know a lot of brothers, because in 2011, they actually had a bicentennial down in Louisiana of their consistory. So they invited the Supreme Council of Louisiana to that. It was a non-title affair, of course.
Right.
So they invited them there because they actually have a tie-in for the history. So me and like 6 other brothers from New York went down to that. And I mean, like, again, a lot of brothers, actually, it's another brother that's actually joined my lodge now recently too. He came over. He went down to that event too. And one of the other brothers actually left and went to the Grand Lodge in New York. That event alone just opened up a lot of brothers' eyes to see the wideness and the breadth of Freemasonry. Because at that meeting, you had like the Supreme Council of Northern Jurisdiction, Southern Jurisdiction, Supreme Council of Honduras. And that's all particularly I remember. But it was also lectures from Brent Morris, from I think it was the Hoyos, and a lot of other great speakers. And it was situations where we weren't able to get that where we were at, but I was already on a path to leaving at the time anyway, because Hurricane Katrina. At that time, it hit them hard. It hit the situation hard. It hit the
Louisiana
hard.
got hit hard during that year.
Yeah, and the temple down there got kind of messed up, and situations happened. And I was like, I give them 5 years from then. So I believe it was like 2007. I believe when Katrina hit. I meant to do the research on it, but whenever I said I'll give it like 5 years from that, to figure out what they're gonna do, and then I wound up leaving. So then I started doing a little research,
So and this is crazy because when I first came to Prince Hall, I literally went online and was on these Facebook groups and literally just started battling people. Like, I mean, literally, anybody who knows me knows that I'm always in the trenches, and have become one of those newer brothers that come in. Don't have the, I'm not no Dave Gillarm. I'm not no Preston Collins or nothing like that. But literally, I was there, going in. And I would go in on the Supreme Council of Louisiana, right? Not knowing. And there was a lot of those brothers that sat there, and they literally kept telling me, you have to do research on what is Scottish Rite regularity. And I just don't no matter how much I sat there and tried, I could never understand what is Scottish Rite regularity. How do they determine regularity?
I'm not even going to say the jurisdiction kind of has it down pat, but that's another thing about, the organization. I mean, it's organized, but things like that, I'm not even sure how they was handling that. We had a little disconnect being we were in New York and they was in Louisiana. But generally, it's a tad bit different, only because, like, from origin, what composes a Grand Lodge is 3 lodges, right?
Right.
So that's what makes a Grand Lodge. Now, what makes Supreme Councils are actually active sovereign Grand Command or sovereign Secretary Generals. So you got to have a certain amount. I believe it's 9 of them in order to establish a council.
Those are 33rds.
Individual Masons. Yes.
Those are 33rds.
Individual 30. Yes. 33rds. Individual 9 Masons to establish a council. But the thing about the regularity, those 9 still have to trace their roots back to England. It's still going to go back to the same.
So in this case, point, so hold on. I think this would be a good time to actually go over their history real quick. And I'm just going to go right through it real quick. I'm not going to even, go into it too much. But they were organized in 1839, right? And the reason why they were organized was because of the absence of the Charleston Supreme Council. Apparently there was a gap there somewhere. And I think was it 1850 is when there was a split, where half had petitioned the Supreme Council of Charleston and was admitted into the Chambers of Deputies. The other half went to the Grand Lodge of Louisiana. And then a year later, James Fullhouse tells the 3, because it was 3 lodges, tells them to come back. And 2/3 of those lodges came back. Then in 1859, the Supreme Council of France found out about James Fullhouse, and they directed him to disband the Supreme Council of Louisiana. And when he had refused, they expelled him from Masonry. Then in 1867, Eugene Chazanac comes into play. And this is a Supreme Council that at one point had recognition with the Grand Lodge of Louisiana and the Grand Orient of France. So that's a real quick, brief rundown on who they are. They are regular in origin because when they were formed by 33rds that came from France, if I'm correct.
Well, it's a different thing. I know Sant'Angelo actually came from Italy, I believe, but it was a few different ones. I'm not sure. They had the actual limits, each one of them. But Sant'Angelo, I believe,
apparently, supposedly they were 33rds.
It was 33rds, and they was regularly received and everything like that. Right. Yes, definitely at the time.
So that's one thing that's interesting. I'm still confused over the whole James Fullhouse thing, because clearly they admitted that they have that 1-year gap, right, where the 3 lodges went and joined the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, right, and then 2/3 came back. So we have, and they came back because James Fullhouse asked them to come back. And this is a question that's going to have to be answered by somebody like Michael Pohl, because he's the one currently doing the research on this. Did James Fullhouse reestablish the Supreme Council of Louisiana while those lodges were in the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, or did he reestablish the Supreme Council of Louisiana when he asked them to come back? So that's the confusing part, and it's important, because this is how you explain continued existence. That's definitely important. And I know that what you speak of, the split actually happened in 1855. So that's where the concat between them and the Supreme Council of Southern Jurisdiction happened, and that's the actual split. So then, I gotta fix that date then.
It's 1855.
So we've gone over, the regularity process, and
Yeah.
I still want to do more research on it just to find out how that whole thing, because you have other Supreme Councils that are around the world, just like the Supreme Council of Louisiana, that might have that same exact regularity thing, I guess. So it's definitely something more to research. So you leave because of the fact that you wanted to be able to travel more and you wanted more, right?
Yeah, basically. Yep.
And what year do you become Prince Hall?
2013.
2013.
November 26th, I believe. 13. Yep.
Okay. And you joined Sons of Kings, right?
Yep.
How was your experience coming into Prince Hall?
It was actually great. I was smooth as sailing. I knew a few brothers here and there. Just coming over, I said, everybody embraced me well. And I continued to, flourish and grow from that point.
So when you come in, right? Because we said this in the beginning, there's a difference, right?
Yes. Yeah,
You didn't know it then, but you know it now. You go through your first initiation, right? And mind you, because we went through, you and I both came in through an occasion, so it's different. But when you first witness your first initiation, right? What are your thoughts? No, because I know for a fact, I know me.
Yeah.
First thing I did was compare. Like you have to. It's like human instinct,
I knew what it was.
Right.
You know what I mean? I knew that, everybody knows that Prince Hall gonna do without the book. Right. You know what I mean? So it was oppressive, of course, but it was expected. Right. It wasn't like some people might have thought it was kind of unexpected, because in my old jurisdiction, we read from the book for the most part. Right. I mean, I took on my own thing where I, at least opening and closing, I put the book down. Right. Right. But that was my own trying to step up my game. But it was definitely different. It's a different, completely different ceremony, and that's the biggest thing when it comes to the difference between Scottish Rite and we usually don't call it. Some people call it York Rite, American Rite.
Right, with the Grand Lodges, Lodges.
Preston Webb, the Princeton Webb version of the ritual is different from a real Scottish Rite ritual completely.
So immediately you were already open to something different and something new when you came in.
Yeah.
How did it feel?
It was good. I was honestly, I of course, I guess I love the Scottish Rite version. I was slightly disappointed when I first came. Until I actually got a chance to study the ritual itself and really understand the words and stuff like that. Right. And now I'm completely, mind boggled or happy or just even the comparison too. I see the value in both sides now.
Good.
Put it like that. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to join the Scottish Rite over here at PHA?
A year. Well, not even a full year, because I came in November 13, and I was starting my Scottish Rite degrees by 2014. Yeah, sometime early. So, I was probably like July or something like that. Yeah.
So once you started taking the degrees here in the Scottish Rite, was that any different?
Yes, that was actually. It was mostly the same, but it was different. The first difference is because under where I was at, Supreme Council of Louisiana, we didn't stop at the 14th degree. So we didn't do that. They meet in 18, 30, and 32. So here in Prince Hall, we meet in 14, 18, and 32. Right. So 4 through 14 was different. Well, I can also say this. I seen full degrees because in Louisiana, we only did the degrees that we opened up on.
Right.
So that was the only degrees we had in full.
So when you say, okay, hold on. When you say, and you only did the degrees that you opened up on.
Yeah. So we did 18 in full, or 18, 30, and 32. The rest we just got the signs and words.
And the allegations.
No.
Not even that.
Not even that. No, just signs and words and the actual breakdown of what the degree means.
Okay.
So exactly, having a full ritual was great.
Okay.
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 Yeah,
Okay. Got you.
exactly.
All right, that makes sense.
But yeah, for the most part, I guess, in actual the rituals, what you'll come to find in a lot of Scottish Rite jurisdictions are a little bit different. Each agrees. So, ours is not the same as a northern Masonic jurisdiction, which is not the same as the southern jurisdiction. Us and Prince Hall basically use the same ritual, northern and southern. So that's going to be the same.
Okay. So, we talk about the differences, and I got this one, and I remember you told me to guard this on my life.
Yeah.
Because it is a very hard book to get.
Yeah.
I've been, ever since the pandemic is when I really opened this book and started going into it, because I just haven't had time. And it's crazy the amount of stuff that's in that book. Right. And so now you're Prince Hall. Now we get through this, right? And now you're CIC. Right. Do you feel like you've accomplished, or do you still want more?
I'm honestly, bro. I mean, I never came into
Which, by the way, I want to put it out there. You were nominated for your 33rd, so congratulations on that. I want to put that out there also.
Thank you. And God willing, every next year this time.
God willing. So one thing I do want to touch on is what is clandestine Scottish Rite Mason, right? Because we're sitting here talking about the Supreme Council of Louisiana and in what you've been through. But they're not clandestine at all. So now let's talk about what clandestine really is.
Yeah.
Right. We have these AASR, af&am type Grand Lodges where, they say they practice the whole full Scottish Rite. They don't. They're attached to a Grand Lodge and they don't have a Supreme Council. And then you have the other side of things where the current situation was and the whole PHA thing.
yeah.
Which, I don't want to get too much into detail about that because it's going to piss off a lot of people. But truthfully and honestly, at the end of the day, it would be wrong for me to have a show on the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite if I don't address something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. Did you have a chance to read the court case?
No, I didn't read the court case itself. No.
So this court case reads very, very differently from any other court case. Because when you actually look at it, they're not talking about lineage. There is no lineage conversation in this entire document. What you have the Supreme Council, the United Supreme Council Southern Jurisdiction in Tennessee that wants to bring them up on fraud charges. But when you read the document, it says that they can't. The reason why they were not charged with fraud was because of the fact that they never claimed to be legitimate to begin with.
Oh, wow.
So if you look at the website of the original website, because I went to the website the other day of the United Supreme Council DC, and it's restructured now. Originally, that website had said that the reason why they formed was because of the misappropriation of funds that was going on.
Funds. Yeah.
Right. So they used that as a way when it came to the whole thing, and it says, well, they never claimed to be legitimate anyway. So you can't sit there and say they're being fraud because they never made the claim to begin with.
Okay.
It's crazy when you read this document. And one thing I want to get across to the people that's listening is the Masonic regularity when it comes to this whole situation was never touched upon in this court case. They were a legitimate business. Okay. Civil law and Masonic law are not the same thing.
They're different.
And they have a right to operate as a business. Anyone has a right to operate. That's just the American way. Right. This situation is crazy. It really is crazy because we recognize them and they are legitimate within the first 3 degrees.
Yep.
But anything
or any other house.
Or any other house.
Yeah.
Or any other house. And we're talking about York Rite and Shrine.
Yep.
And we can have these conversations with them when we're in those respective houses or whatever the case may be, but we can't talk to them Masonically when it comes to the Scottish Rite because they're not a legitimate Masonic body based on Masonic law. Now, Masonic law, when we talk about Masonic law, we're talking about Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? In this Constitution, and inside the Southern jurisdiction, Tennessee's Constitution, it clearly reads, am I allowed to read from here? Would I get in trouble from reading from here?
Nah, don't do that.
Okay, so see,
I don't know.
I gotta listen to my CIC. So, in a nutshell, it pretty much says that it only recognizes 2 United Supreme Councils for that umbrella, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Anything else is considered clandestine, irregular, or whatever the case may be, right?
Well, that'll go back to the basic rules of the Scottish Rite. I ain't sure. I think it's the Grand Constitution that they don't supposed to be 2 Supreme Councils here in America.
Right. Yeah. So now we have our 2, and then we have the 2 for the. And I hate using the term mainstream, and I'm trying to avoid using that term. And we have 2 for the Grand Lodges, for the state Grand Lodges, and that's what they're talking about when they talk about 2 per.
Yep.
Now, it's unfortunate that situation is going on. Because we have a lot of good brothers in that organization, but unfortunately, they never. If you look at the court case, they never made the claim to be legitimate, which is the reason why they won. You know, they tried the Southern jurisdiction tried to get them on also using the double-headed eagle.
Double-headed eagle.
But unfortunately, they couldn't because they didn't own that either.
Yeah, that's not patent.
That was a lost case. Also, I don't understand how they and this is where education is important because I do not understand how they lost this court case. The whole double edit, I would have never went for that.
Yeah.
And when you talk about legitimacy, it should have been pretty black and white that they never made that claim. So it would have been very hard. But the problem now we have is, and it's funny because I had a conversation with another brother, right? And there's some brothers who are sitting there talking about there's the new way and then the old way. And some consider the Southern jurisdiction, Tennessee, the old way. And yeah, it's crazy. I was
the new way and the old way. That sounds like something the new way made up.
It is crazy when I had this conversation. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So
well, basically, it also sounds like the original split, even though it ain't the same. But between in Grand Lodge of England, it's almost the ancients and the moderns.
The ancients and the moderns, right? That's exactly what it sounds like.
That's exactly what that is.
But it's just to me, it's just crazy because we consider John G. Jones the father of clandestine masonry, right?
Yep.
Because don't get me wrong, clandestine masonry has been around since before John G. Jones. If you look at the situation with the National Grand Lodge, right? You look at Hiram Grant and Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Technically, they were clandestine if you want to get technical. You know what I'm saying? Because of how they formed or whatever the case may be. Same thing with the ancients. I would call them clandestine based on our standards now because of the way they formed.
Yeah.
Now, so this has been going on longer than John G. Jones, but it was John G. Jones who really made it prominent and him and other people getting together to form all these other Grand Lodges. But when he did what he did with the United Supreme Council, right? And he had that split and he left and formed his own Supreme Council. We frowned upon that as PHA. And we found that very, very wrong. He had his own people, whatever the case may be, and that situation happened, right? And it was a few years before he got expelled from the Grand Lodge. So they were operating while he was a regular member. If we consider that wrong, and we know that it's wrong, why is this situation okay? Why do you think it's okay? We know very well that the formation is just and I just use regular logic. If you know for a fact that this misappropriation of funds is happening and you're paying into this organization, you don't leave and just start your own one. You get the cops involved, you get a lawsuit together, and you deal with it. You just don't start your own. I've never agreed with that. And the reason why I don't agree with that is because I've never agreed with anybody starting their own Grand Lodge because they don't like the way things are being. I've never been
not
a
how
fan
we
of
work. That's not how it works.
That's not how Masonry operates. Right. It's not how Masonry operates. So that's the reason why I feel the way I feel when it comes to that situation. I don't want to get too much into it, and I didn't want to get too much into it, but I felt that it didn't need to be addressed. So we do have these other clandestine organizations that claim to be Scottish Rite and Scottish Rite affiliated, but they don't practice the Scottish Rite degrees. It's crazy.
Yeah.
If you are part of that, if you are a part of something like that, where you're just being handed a 32nd degree, but you miss everything underneath it, I'm sorry, you are clandestine. You are bogus. You really need to reevaluate, because that's not how Masonry works.
If you are receiving your 32nd degree in a Grand Lodge,
if you're receiving it in a Grand Lodge, you're bogus.
You're bogus.
It's really that simple. And you have to, and I think people just need to really, really understand.
Even with the craft degrees themselves, that's what you were saying. A lot of them, of course, are Scottish Rite in name only. For I don't know what reason. I always just assume this to make it seem like they're different. But if your ritual looks anything like Duncan, you're not in a Scottish Rite ritual in the first 3 degrees.
I saw something the other day. It said AASR FM. And I'm sitting here, ancient and accepted Scottish Rite Freemason. But yet you're a part of, but that tagline is attached to a Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
And yet you see nothing wrong with that.
I don't know if, because I know like in Mexico, they have Grand Lodges that are Scottish Rite. I'm not sure if they use the whole ASSARM.
See, that's another thing. The Supreme Council of Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, they have recognition with the Supreme Council of Louisiana.
I don't know who the Supreme Council of Louisiana has recognition with currently, because they have old records that said this. I don't know if they're talking to anybody currently.
Right.
But I'm just saying, in Mexico, they also have Scottish Rite Grand Lodges.
And I've seen that in Puerto Rico.
I'm not sure if they use the same title. Yeah, in Puerto Rico.
I've seen that in Puerto Rico.
I'm not sure if they see the thing about the difference in Puerto Rico. I believe they're just a Grand Lodge who practices the Scottish Rite.
The first 3 degrees.
The first 3 degrees, exactly. Right. They're not claiming to be a Scottish Rite Grand Lodge.
Right. They don't go above the 3rd degree. They do the first 3 degrees Scottish Rite, and that's it. Which I've also seen with the Grand Lodge of New York, where they've done Scottish Rite degrees within the first 3 degrees. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. Just like in Louisiana, where they have the 10 lodges in the 16th
Louisiana has that. But they also have French Rite also, or something like that they do as
well. I ain't sure if they operate in the French Rite currently, but they had it at one time. They had the French Rite and the Scottish Rite. But right now they just have the Scottish Rite, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So, like I said, there's definitely a difference between the ritual itself that a lot of people don't know, and that's the main difference when it comes to a lot of those clandestine Grand Lodges, is they use it in the name only, and they think that the members actually think they're practicing the Scottish Rite in the first 3 degrees,
and they're not,
and then nowhere near it. Exactly, nowhere, because they either using Duncans or More Light or Lester's or any one of those rituals like that are, definitely not Scottish Rite first 3 degrees. It's a little bit different.
So at the end of the day, we're trying to educate, you know what I'm saying? When you're here now and you see how much things are different, right? Do you have any regrets coming over and leaving?
Listen, I actually, like I said, I'm always different. I have no regrets of coming over, leaving, and I actually have no regrets of where I was at.
Good.
Because it actually made me the Mason I am today, and this just added on another brick and helped me come in here guns blazing and running.
Right, there you go. There you go.
Exactly.
I mean, it added to your resume. If anything, it did add to your resume.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that our Grand Lodge and our Supreme Council does not recognize the Supreme Council of Louisiana.
No, not at all. I ran through that in the history books.
Right, when we had our class, you went through that, and which, by the way, it's right here.
Yeah,
this is why I keep my books here, so you know what I'm saying. Everybody can see.
I'm taking my time through that book. It's pretty interesting, but it's a lot of information in there that brothers can get. Not even so much about the Scottish Rite, but just masonry in general, and especially, of course, Prince Hall masonry in general. Right. You learn a lot of things about it. So, just that
there's some typos inside that book that I did find, but the one interesting thing that I like about this book is how it goes into the history of the Peter Ray situation.
Okay.
So when it came to the whole situation with Peter Ray was a member, Dr. Peter Ray was a member of United Grand Lodge of New York, PHA. Right? He was a part of, I think, Square Stone Lodge number 6. And
he was in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn,
that was in Brooklyn, yeah.
Yep, that was here in Brooklyn, right? In Brooklyn, right? And what happened was he was Sovereign Grand Commander, and then it was the Supreme Council of New York. Something happened with John G. Jones, had brought him up on a court case, and then they couldn't be a part of the merger because of this whole entire situation, because of territorial jurisdiction charges or whatever, right? And so he couldn't come together with the merger. They evolved to the Supreme Council of United States, and Alan what was his name? Alan becomes a Sovereign Grand Commander. He's part of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia.
Okay.
Right. He becomes Sovereign Grand Commander, and then they split. There's a split that happens. Some of the members go to PHO and joins Dorsey Seville's National Supreme Council, which is the ones that the building that's owned in Brooklyn. And then the other half stay with PHA and join the United Supreme Council. Right? Then you have this whole situation where now the Supreme Council of the United States is now gone, dismantled, and then you have the National Supreme Council stealing their history.
Yeah.
And I'm saying stealing their history because at the end of the day, there is no Articles of Union to say that they merged with them.
And that's how you take somebody. Well, that's how the history is accepted. Yep.
Right. So now you have that whole situation, and that's another Scottish Rite body that's around that claims to be legitimate, and they try to tie their name to Dr. Peter Ray, but they're not legitimate because they became part of the National Supreme Council, which was under the National Grand Lodge when it first formed. And this is not the old National Grand Lodge. This is the new iteration of the National Grand Lodge. And this is why I want to put it out there. They are not legitimate either. Why? Because they were part of Dorsey Seville's National Supreme Council. So that's another thing to talk about. Do you have conversations with anybody that when it comes to this whole Scottish Rite thing? And what do you say to them if you do?
As far as what?
Like if you run into them.
If I run into like somebody from
any of these Scottish Rite bodies that are not legitimate. Well, I'm not talking about Supreme Council of Louisiana.
Yeah. Right.
Like I said, I don't want to focus, even though
I even told the same thing when I was under the Supreme Council of Louisiana, that because if you're practicing anything that looks like Duncan's, you're not right.
So you even under the Supreme Council of Louisiana, you would say that same thing.
I was saying the same thing to him too. I was straightening up like y'all, because the way my attitude was, even when I was over there, I was kind of like, all right, y'all bogus. I had in my mind it's still bogus Masons.
Right, because I mean, it's just some of this stuff is just, believe it or not, it's common sense.
Yeah.
Like once you start doing the research and it starts adding everything up, some of this information is just really common sense. When you look at,
we had actually had an organization of the Brotherhoods of Haiti, I believe there was.
Yes.
They were renting some space in the temple where we were using when I was under there, right?
And they still there.
So I took a look at their charter, right? And I was like, oh, Evergreen. What? They was claiming a lodge from the Supreme Council of Louisiana.
Really?
Yes. Now, I'm not sure exactly the tie-in, because what happened, that lodge no longer exists. The chapter still exists, but the lodge don't. So I don't know if the lodge somehow got sucked up and went under them, and now
they went
claim
and they may have
claim the
left
history.
and split.
Yeah, something like that, and then they claiming the history. And actually on the charter, but that was wild. I was like, what? How you claiming Supreme Council of Louisiana history?
And mind you, they have their own building in Brooklyn. They do have their own building.
They have their own building now? Okay.
Yeah, I remember seeing their eagle in one of the buildings because they have the real distinct eagle. It's not like ours where the wings are up and then the southern jurisdiction is down. They're straight.
Yeah. Straight. Yeah. Exactly.
So it's really not hard to. You can really tell the difference when you see them. So apparently they have a building here in Brooklyn.
Okay.
But, you know, I just at the end of the day, man, I want to be able to teach these guys what everything is. So I'm glad you showed up. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for you know, going into everything. I do appreciate you being able to share your time with me to go over this, because one strong thing I'm not, and I will admit it, I may be strong in the first 3 degrees, but when it comes to Scottish Rite, it's like so much to learn. It's like a whole nother dedication.
It's another world. Yeah, definitely. It's another world. It takes a lot of dedication if you want to truly get into the philosophy of it, and
philosophy is one thing. Philosophy is one thing. Structure is another.
Yeah.
You know, and you can follow the philosophy rather easily. It's the structure and how everything is formed and put together that confuses me from time to time.
Okay. This is different than the grant. You used to one thing. It
is different, yeah.
This is the only body I believe that's like that, though. But it goes back to how it was established and how it came up. You know, those sovereigns back in the days was sovereign.
Now, one thing you did mention to me that I just thought about right now, and you mentioned this to me before. You said the Supreme Councils have a right to actually practice the first 3 degrees if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, it's in our ritual. You can see it in our ritual. It tells you that, you know, they just basically give up their right in order to have harmony with the Grand Lodges or whatever, but they can actually operate the first 3 degrees because it's a separate right. So every, you know, body has its own right. A right is composed of all the degrees. It's not just, you know, it can't start at the 4th. It got to start on the first floor. So, yeah, that's what it is. Even I remember learning that one of the first lodges in Hawaii was actually established by the Supreme Council, I believe, of France. And then eventually, you know, when they established the Grand Lodge, it just went under the Grand Lodge, and then, you know, they gave up their right. So any place where there isn't a Grand Lodge, a Supreme Council will come in and operate, the first 3 degrees for the most part. And then if the lodges choose to establish a Grand Lodge, and, you know, they would just disconnect and let them have the first 3.
If they wanted to.
If they wanted to.
But at that point, they risk recognition, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. That's because basically, for the most part, that's the way Freemasonry works at this point, where Supreme Council just operate 4 through 33, and craft lodges 1 through 3. So, I mean, that causes the most harmony. So it's kind of, I would say, kind of best that way.
And that's why it's accepted that way, because.
Yeah, it's harmony. You always want to have some peace and harmony in the craft.
Right. Even though we know that ain't always true.
I mean, you want it that way, and it's designed to be that way, but you know.
So, Brother Alexander, we're gonna close out. Any closing remarks when it comes to things you want to get across, and when it comes to the Scottish Rite?
Just anybody that's getting into anything you get into, just do your little research and make sure, like Josh always stresses, you know, that we also stress that your body, whatever you're joining, is legitimate. Now that we have, you know, the internet and everything like that, you can easily find a proper way to get into organizations. And basically, right now, to join any body is going to be going through either a state Grand Lodge or a Prince Hall Grand Lodge, you know, to first establish your journey as a Freemason, and then learn those first 3 degrees well. Because if you're trying to join the 4th through 32nd and understand it, you're going to need a firm base in those first 3 degrees, because it goes up a different path to understand. It's a beautiful thing. I love it, as you know.
All right, bro. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you, John.
All right, y'all. See you on the next episode. Later.